Okay, thank you very much. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting on the 28th of June. The first item is the notice of recording. So just to advise everyone in this meeting, the meeting will be webcast, both live and subsequent broadcast via the Council's YouTube site. Anybody in this meeting is entitled to take photographs or make a recording if you wish to do so. Item 2 is apologies, and I've received apologies from Councillors Bridget Jones and Robert Alden, who are attending the LGA conference. In the case of Robert Alden, Gareth Moore is substituting. Councillor Karen McCarthy has unfortunately had a fall and damaged her hip, so she will be attending this meeting virtually. Just to make it absolutely clear that we are in line with the law, that will mean that Councillor McCarthy will not be voting on any of the reports in front of us this morning. Are there any other apologies? No, if we could note those then, please. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anybody wish to declare an interest in respect of any of today's agenda items? Magic.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm still an employee at England Stick and Neil Solicitors. They're based at 267 273 High Street, Edmonton. They may be beneficiaries of the
You'll be remaining in the meeting.
I've spoken to the City Solicitor and I can remain in the meeting and vote.
Okay.
Yeah, just in respect of item 14 on domestic abuse, there is a small grant as part of that goes to Birmingham Settlements. I'm a council-appointed trustee of Birmingham Settlements, so as Tinder advises me, I can remain in the vote.
Okay, for no others, can we note those declarations of interest, please? And we'll move on to item 4, which is exempt information. And just need to bring everybody's attention to one item. It's in respect of agenda item 16, the Dolphin Centre building improvement works. Unfortunately, the private and exempt appendices were not marked up as such, and therefore were uploaded onto the CMIS system as public reports. That has now been rectified with a note explaining that the reports are not to be shared. So if anybody wishes to raise anything on those exempt appendices, we will, of course, go into private session in order to do so. And we also have exempt appendices in respect of items 7, 8, 9 and 20. Does anybody wish to raise anything on those exempt appendices? No? Okay, then we will continue with the agenda as laid out, other than Councillor Sharon Thompson has to leave this meeting early, so I'm intending to take item 12 immediately after item 6, if everybody's comfortable with that. And then there's one item of AOB that Sharon wishes to report in that we will take. Yeah, we'll take after item 12. Okay, we'll move on then to item 5, which is the provisional financial outturn. Councillor Mosquito. Oh, there you are. Councillor. I see. Yeah, it's a bit Putin-esque, the distance you're away from me.
That's an analogy I will never tell.
But Yvonne, the provisional financial outturn report for 21-22.
The 2021 financial year has been another challenging year for the City Council. Our services have had to operate within the worldwide pandemic, the impact of Brexit and the cost of goods considered pronounced in the materials for the construction industry, the impact of unrest in the Ukraine, the rising price of inflation which has worsened the cost of living for many of our Birmingham citizens. Yet despite these challenges, Birmingham City Council has continued to live within its means, and this is the provisional financial outturn report for the financial year 2021 to 2022. I am pleased to report that the City Council is reporting a revenue underspend of 17.8 million, having previously forecast an overspend halfway through the year of 10.2 million. The 17.8 million is proposed to be transferred to the Financial Resilience Reserve, FRR, to further strengthen the City Council's position in these difficult times. Some people, as I do, wondered how this was achieved, Leader. While it is a testament and tribute to the efforts of my predecessor, Councillor Tristan Chatfield, who worked tirelessly with yourself, Rebecca Hilliard, Becky, and the senior management team and the staff across the organisation to ensure that the City Council was able to keep within its budget. The improvement was helped by the introduction of spending controls that introduced in November 2021 on the basis of the forecasted overspend in year. The controls enhance three key elements: staffing, properties, facilities management and procurement. These controls have avoided unnecessary expenditure, and these controls will be maintained in the new financial year. At the start of the 2021-22 financial year, SIPFA awarded the council a 3-star financial management rating. This is a significant improvement on the 1-star awarded in 2019. This is because we have delivered a 91%, which is 33 million of our planned savings. We have maintained healthy reserve balances, reduced borrowing levels, and as indicated before, have put in place measures to manage costs down. So further good news is that we are commencing 2022-23 financial year with a balanced budget and no adverse impact on our reserves. This sets us up to be an even more financially resilient, particularly as we look to our approach in managing our medium-term financial plan gap of 33 million from 2023 to 2024 onwards. I want to draw attention to the proposed use of 1 million of council tax hardship reserve in 2022 to 23 to fund local welfare provision. This is a discretionary scheme which helps vulnerable people in short-term crisis with food and essential items. We know the cost of living crisis. In this cost of living crisis, there are major pressures facing families and citizens on low incomes. Further pressure on this scheme has come from the 50% cuts in the discretionary housing payments from central government. We propose to fund extra staffing of 350,000 this year to deal with the rising number of claims, and put in a further 650,000 to supplement local welfare provision. Under the Household Support Grant, as pledged by yourself, Leader, in May, I'm pleased to state that we are supporting families and pensions on low incomes by proposing the use of 1.3 million of the Financial Resilience Reserve to fund a 10% top-up to the 12.8 million received from government for the Household Support Grant. And the capital programme, the final spend of 2021 to 22 was 520.1 million. This is 236.4 million below the planned expenditure of 764.4 million. This year, the NGO slippage was 262.9, along with a net overspend of 26.6 million. It is important to know that no financial resources will be lost as a result of the slippage. The resources and planned expenditure will be rolled forward in future years. The in-year overspend of 26.6 million is fully funded, and there is no impact on future year resources. At the end of the year, under Treasury Management, the Council's total loan net of Treasury investments stood at just 2.96 billion, compared to 3.16 billion at the start of the year. This reduction is welcome. This reduction is welcome because it is part of the Council's plan to reach. I have not got COVID. I've not got COVID. I'm testing myself. It's part of the Council's plan to reduce borrowing and therefore the cost of interest we have to pay. I'm going to stop there because I think I'm going to continue coughing, but can I just simply say under the collection fund, Leader, that council tax and business rates income have been heavily impacted by COVID. And outturn the council's, thank you so much, outturn the council's share of the collection fund is reporting a deficit of 3 million. This compares to a forecast deficit of 36 million at Q3. The main reasons for this improvement is that in the deficit are decreases in the expected level of bad debt provision required. This improvement will provide more resources for City Council when setting the budget of 2023 to 24. And Leader, we have a wonderful Rebecca here with us who will be able to take any questions that may be put by my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. I will take questions. I want to comment myself. I do think this is a significant outcome, given the challenges that the City Council has faced over the last 12 months. I also think it is a parting gift from former Councillor Tristan Chatfield, who had this portfolio over the last 12 months. And on behalf of Cabinet, I'd like to place on record my thanks to former Councillor Tristan Chatfield and indeed the finance team for this out-term report that's in front of us this morning, because I do think it's a significant achievement. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you for that report. Just first of all, on the allocation to the hardship fund, which I think is a sensible and welcome move to make in the present circumstances. To what extent is the £1 million an arbitrary figure, because 1 million is a nice round fund, or has there been a full assessment of what the likely demand and pressure on hardship fund is likely to be in the coming year with the rising cost of living? In terms of the financial situation overall, I won't dispute the Council's financial control has increased substantially. The praise of Councillor Chatfield's raised the high bar for you, Councillor Mosquito, in terms of maintaining it, particularly with some of the troubles coming down the line for local authorities. Looking at the detail of this report, I do wonder how much of the underspend is cash flow. In other words, how much of it is projects which are delayed, haven't been completed, or money's been pulled from budgets in the coming year. There's a lot of variation in departments, and there's quite a lot of areas where you find overspend which will need to be examined and monitored going forwards. For instance, there's a £1 million overspend on Commonwealth games on league and consultancy costs. Now, is that an absolute overspend, or is that an overspend that's drawn down from this year's budgets? Similarly, you see underspends of 1.1 million in the environmental improvements cleanliness budget in the street scene. In other words, that's something on the fly tipping programme. Does that £1 million lost to that programme now? Or is it cash flow which will be restored in the coming years so that the promised action on fly tipping will take place? So much to welcome in the Council's progress in balancing its budgets. We know there's huge challenges ahead. And one challenge I just wanted to raise is an underspend on schools budgets and red schools grants. I think £4 million gone into reserve for schools. And we've not heard much about this at the moment, but my understanding, declaring an interest as a council appointed school governor, if I may, that there's a lot of problems for schools coming down the line in terms of their finances. And there's little sign of rescue coming from national government. So that £4 million has been set aside in reserve in the direct schools grants. Will that be applied and deployed to support schools in hardship?
Good. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, just say, Councillor Mosquito, I hope you're well soon, and thank you for attending today. There's a few questions I was going to ask on the back of the report. The first section was Annex A1 Adult Social Care Directorate. I noticed there's a £42 million underspend there before you factor in the transfer to reserves, but yet I noticed that the council is charging the precept. I was just thinking that, if we've got that level of an underspend, do we need to be charging the precept? And obviously, once that money enters the reserves, will it continue to be ring-fenced for adult social care, or will those reserves be able to move that anywhere else? On the Annex A4 City Operations on Street Scene, I noticed we've got another underspend claim there of £3.3 million. However, that includes a £3.7 million saving on borrowing costs with the fleet replacement due to the number of wagons that have not been delivered, the new ones have not been delivered across the city at the rate that they said they were going to be, which I think they seem to be paying that in poor collection rates, because it seems to see later on in the report that quite a lot of the reason for the miscollections is due to breakdown of wagons. So you can have a feeling if we have those new wagons on pace, we may not be seeing the number of poor collections, so possibly a false economy there. On the highways, I noticed that we've got a £4.6 million overspend. which seems to be driven mostly by a £6.1 million shortfall in parking income. Now, of course, like everything in a lot of these things, it's all put down to COVID, which undoubtedly has had a significant impact. But over time, being a council, I've noticed that we've never hit our parking income targets. We have seen one improvement where they used to be called losses, where now I think we do recognise that they're just a shortfall in the budget. But with the transport policies that we have in this council at this moment in time, we are removing car parks and making it more difficult for cars to come into the city centre. And so therefore those parking returns are going to continue to fall. And so may I suggest that it's only going to get worse. So maybe this figure may be set at a level that we're never really going to hit. And that's the point I have. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Gareth. No, okay. Let me first of all invite Yvonne to respond to that, and then I might want to pick up a couple of those issues that you have raised myself, Yvonne. Okay, before then I'll bring Becky in. If I could just pick up the points that Councillor, or some of the points that Councillor Hunt raised, starting off with the Government's Household Support Fund. There's not been an detailed study about the adequacy of this £12.8 million. I think most people would accept that that's not going to be adequate to deal with the oncoming cost of living crisis and the position people are going to find themselves in. The top up of 1.3 million is simply a 10% top up that we have put in, because I made a commitment to do that a few weeks ago. What I do think needs to happen, I do think the government needs to provide more funding in future through this household support fund. It provided such funding during the pandemic, and it's clearly the case that additional funding is going to be needed to get people through the cost of living crisis. So we will be lobbying the government on that matter. The £4 million schools underspend that you referred to will be applied in future years, and the other underspends that you raised as well will go into earmarked reserves for ring-fence spending in that area in future years as well. Same applies, I believe, to the questions you were asking, Ewan. And in respect of the underspend, the 42 million you referred, that's a combination of health and social care. We cannot deploy that money in the same area of budget that we'll be using the precept for. So there is still a need to apply the precept. And if I could just remind you, in all the figures issued by the government, they make an assumption that all local authorities with social care responsibilities give care. So it's in the government's numbers, and that's part of the reason why we do take that. The other questions that you've asked, if Becky can't answer them now, we will provide written answers to. I think in future years it might be wise, if you have detailed questions like the ones you've raised, to either arrange for a meeting with the finance officer prior to the cabinet meeting, or to send those questions in writing so that we can actually respond. Becky.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up the £42 million underspend in adult social care. It's actually joint health and adult social care funding. We would not be able to use it for general adult social care funding, which is what we've raised the precept for, hence why the precept's still being raised. In terms of parking, yeah, there was a £6.1 million overspend in 21-22. As you know, we update the MTFP during the year. It's a live document. So when you see the next iteration of that coming forward, and we'll be doing a narrative on Q1 as well for 22-23, then that will be picked up in there.
Thank you. In which case, can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.11? Agreed. Thank you. Item 6 then is building and fire safety report. Sharon.
Thank you very much. Caught me off guard there. So this one's just the update in terms of the building and fire safety, following on from the Grenfell tragedy that took place a few years back. But just before I actually present the report, I just want to put on note condolences to the family of the lady that lost her life in the fire that we saw over the weekend, and those that lost their neighbour and their friend, and those that lost their houses. And I guess that was a stark reality for all of us of how important fire safety is. And I just also want to put on note, thank you to officers from City Operations, Housing, and also the Children's Trust for their swift actions and being on guard at the late hours of the night and moving very quickly. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that was involved with that, because I think it made a significant difference, and the community that have helped it in the coming days following on from that tragedy. The Grenfell Fire is probably the worst housing disaster that I've seen, tragedy, and I always say this every year, in my lifetime. And Birmingham City Council was very clear at the time that we was going to take action. The government wouldn't give us any money in regards to the fire safety measures because we didn't have the cladding, but we thought it was important that we retrofitted our 213 tower blocks. And for that, we invested a significant amount of money into that, which was into the 50,000 in total, 50 million, sorry, in total, into improving fire safety. Since then, there has been a number of recommendations, not just from the Hackett report, but we saw something go through the Building Safety Bill on the 28th of April and received royal assent, I can't say it properly, with many provisions coming into force between a year and to 18 months' time. So we've really been working on that and also looking at what other provisions that can be taken and put into place around fire safety, because we want to make sure that our tenants not only are safe but also feel safe. In terms of the fire safety on tower blocks and retrofitting, there is a number of properties that still to this day have not taken up the offer from the council to have sprinklers fitted. And I would like to urge those people to please take up the offer. We have seen over the last couple of years, there have been fires in the tower blocks. But what has happened is that they've been put out really quickly and in some instances before the fire service actually turned up, and that's a result of the sprinklers. So I'm going to take the report as read, and I'm sure that everybody agrees that this is very important, and this will be something that we will continue to bring annually to this forum, just to give an update on what's happened in terms of fire safety. Thank you.
Sharon, any comments or questions on this, Gareth?
Thank you, Leader. I certainly want to echo Councillor Thompson's comments about the tragedy that happened in Tranmere at the weekend. Obviously, it's truly horrific what has happened, and I know, speaking with Councillor Payne yesterday, he's very grateful that the support council officers have shown to his residents in responding very quickly to what is true horrific circumstances. So very much would echo that. I welcome the report as a councillor who represents 13 tower blocks. This was a particularly interesting report to have sight of. And I do have some questions of Councillor Thompson. In relation to the building safety manager and officers, I just wondered what engagement will they be having with elected members? Because certainly I've noticed there's a significant increase in the number of inquiries I'm receiving in relation to tower blocks in our board. And I wondered if that was represented in the city as well. So what plans will they be doing to engage with board members to ensure that residents are truly satisfied with the safety concerns in the buildings? I know obviously there's reference to the fire doors in there, and there's some detail behind that programme, but it doesn't say actually how many fire doors we need to replace in total and how those the programme will be prioritised. I would hope that we prioritise those or whether there's any safety concerns relating to fire doors, but I think it's a bit light on detail on that, given that fire doors are particularly crucial to ensure that fire does not spread within buildings, as used to do with Grenfell, sadly. The report also mentioned regular inspections, and that they're supposed to have notice on there to say that that's happened. Quite surprised that is the case, certainly given the number of complaints I've received, and I recently visited with housing officers last week to discuss issues around cleanliness and safety in tower blocks. So it'd be interesting to know exactly, are we sure that those are definitely taking place? Because certainly my inbox would suggest very much otherwise, and I suspect that will be replicated with other councillors who have tower blocks in their wards. And then the final point was around electrical safety. Obviously, the council will have to carry out electrical safety checks on all its properties, as all landlords do. Electrical safety can create fire safety, but as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen reference to that in this report. So perhaps for future updates that could be included, because obviously that is a major risk for fire purposes.
Thank you. We'll get those questions answered shortly. John.
Thank you. Can I echo the Cabinet members' condolences about the events of the weekend, and also thanks to those who took part in tackling it. Just one question from this. I noticed that the fire safety workers says corroborated the state book policy, which I think was controversial at Grenfell, because this was where people were told to stay at home and then they were trapped in their flats. and just looking at some of the policies around this nationally, I see that in general it's supported. But I just wondered what work had been done to test it, maybe in terms of real life drills and so forth, to see how it works. Because I know that the campaigners around Grenfell are very unhappy about the policy being retained in its present form by fire services.
Thank you. Sharon.
Thank you very much.
I will start with Councillor Moore's questions. So the first one around what engagement will take place with members. If that isn't happening already, I will make sure that that does happen. But what I can say that in terms of tenant engagement, we are going to do some consultation around that and start, revamping the policy so that we're getting a broader reach of the tenants that are coming forward and sharing their views. And within that, we will also consider the views of elected members and the way that we're communicating with elected members. So I just want to give you that assurance straight away. And I put notes in my phone and it locked. Daily block inspections. I do know that block inspections should have been taking place, but also I'm not using this as a cop-out, but it's the truth. Over the period from COVID leading up, there was a lot of changes into the way that they were doing business in terms of the blocks, in terms of the caretakers as well. But I will bring Steve in to give you more of an update on that, because I don't want you to hold me to account on something that I can't actually confirm. And I'll also ask Steve to meet the points around the electrical safety and the fire doors. And then I'll go on to Councillor Hunt. Steve?
Yeah, no problem. Right, thank you, Chair. So just regarding I'll just recap over the BSMs as well, the building safety managers, if that's okay. So we've got 2 building safety managers appointed, both very different sets of experience, but one of them I'm very pleased to advise you that is a former fire officer himself, working in West Midlands Fire Service. So significant experience in the exact fire blocks that we're referring to in fire ground incidents. So that's really robust there. And yes, the building safety managers, although relatively new, so they won't have engaged with elected members at this stage. Absolutely, the commitment to do so in all wards actually is right there. So where members have got high-rise blocks in their wards, which many have, the BSMs can engage with you and talk to you about the current condition of the blocks, which are all safe, by the way, but also meet you, have a walk around, and give you, particularly, we'd probably welcome your input in helping us with what Councillor Thompson explained is one of his challenges about getting access to properties where people are not allowing us access to fit sprinklers, because we need everyone's help with this to try to encourage people to increase that take up. So that's that question. Regarding fire doors, so fire doors have been done as part of that circa £50 million that Councillor Thompson referred to. We spent £33 million on sprinklers, would you believe, throughout the blocks, but fire doors were the additional part of that. So fire doors have been updated in the majority of high-rise blocks, and they were done on a priority basis, as in worst condition first. We've still got a significant programme of fire door replacements, because we're not just stopping at high-rise blocks. We're going to continue into low-rise flats as well, where they require fire doors. All fire doors are currently compliant with the building regulations, because they're not retrospective. However, that doesn't mean to say we're not going to continue to improve them to the highest QMark standards, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. Electrical safety, again, to give you some assurance on that. All our social housing has a electrical safety check on a 5-year cycle, and that's within the electrical wiring regulations requirement. I can tell you that we are currently compliant across the 60,000 units that we've got in the city within that indicator. And then the stay put policy, a really interesting question there from the room. Yes, stay put policy in Grenfell, absolutely, it didn't turn out to be the right choice. But what happens in these incidents, and obviously that was due to the cladding, not anything else. So what happens in these incidents is the stay put policy should be the default policy. The fire service can change that to an evacuation policy, because as soon as they arrive on scene, they have command of that fire incident, and they can change policy to an evacuation policy. Now, thankfully, in our blocks, because this is really important reassurance for you all, we've got no such blocks with ACM cladding remaining on any of our tower blocks, of 213 in the city. So we've got no such risk that Grenfell posed, and all our flats have got what's called compartmentalised, insofar as that each flat is self-contained in the event of a fire, and it is absolutely the right thing for residents to stay put in that flat until the fire service can come in and extinguish fires. And I would add further that, you know, I know from personal experience, because my brother's a firefighter, a senior firefighter, and actually customers evacuating high-rise flats actually causes an obstacle, an obstruction to firefighters entering high-rise blocks. So it's absolutely important and significant that customers do remain in stay put for those reasons, and we would only evacuate if the fire brigade say so, and we've got no reason why we would need to, because our blocks are fire safe compliant. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Steve. Sharon?
Yes, I think that answers both the questions from the councillors. Just to add as well, since coming back in the portfolio and working with officers to put together a series of housing sort of drop-ins for members, and also housing briefing sessions for members, particularly newer members, because we've got quite a few across the chamber. And following on from Councillor Moore's comments, I'm happy to speak to officers about including fire safety within those sort of menu of options of briefing sessions for members, just to give that level of reassurance.
Thank you, Leader. Just to make a plug again for the member engagement aspect, so because I appreciate Councillor Tomlinson's comments, so that I don't think you can start to plan what I have to chase lots of times to get updates as to what's going on in my ward, certainly. And I fear that other councils are in the same situation. It shouldn't actually be that case. In Springfield, it's a classic example, because I only got the information about what's happening in my ward when I contacted you about it last night.
Okay, that's noted.
Thank you. Can we agree recommendation 2.1? Agreed. We'll now take item 12, which is additional licensing houses in multiple occupation. Sharon.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Leader.
Before just going to the actual report, I just wanted to just thank officers again for their work on this, but also that just to confirm to everybody that we have now submitted the application form for the selective licensing for the 25 blocks, and that happened this week, which we are really excited about. So, okay, I've got the wrong briefing there. 1 second. Additional licensing. Sorry, Leader. Okay, so following on from the consultation around selective licensing, we wanted to listen to the feedback from members, and one of the things that came back very strongly was actually that 25 wards was great, and if everybody knows, if it was my ambition, we would have done the whole city for consultation, but actually the government wouldn't really allow us to do that. But other wards felt like they wanted some additional sort of licensing and sort of powers over the sort of the private rented sector, so to speak. So what we are proposing in this one is that we're looking at going out to consultation on citywide additional licensing, and this is specifically around HMOs. So we know that previously we brought in the Article 4, and that's really around the planning stage. This is really about those that are already in situ and making sure that we've got extra provision around that, which will also bring in some form of extra income alongside that to enable the team to be able to monitor and carry out enforcement on that. The proposed additional licensing scheme, like I said, will cover the whole city. And in terms of properties, because I think that's what's most important to people, that would be around about 12,000 properties. So that's quite a few. That's quite a lot, actually, of additional licensing. I'm going to take this as read, and I'm happy to take questions.
Starting with John.
Thank you very much. Welcome this move. And I think my question is just to confirm, this will apply to all HMOs, because the problem, one of the issues with the planning extension was it only applied to new HMOs, which allowed an awful lot of people to get around it. by various means. This will apply to all HMOs, if I'm correct, which will be very welcome in bringing all HMOs under regulation and supervision.
Yes, I can confirm that's all HMOs.
Gareth?
Thank you, Leader. As someone who represents a ward who's outside of the selective licensing regime that's proposed, and very much welcome this suggestion of having additional licensing. I think many councils will know that HMOs are sadly becoming applied to many streets in the city and all the problems associated with it, and we need to crack down on this to ensure that they're being properly regulated and not causing the level of destruction that many of us are sadly seeing. My memory from the selective licensing discussions were that there was insufficient data to enable other categories to be considered, particularly around the idea of a citywide selective licensing regime. I've seen the report that we do now have extensive data that was gathered for the additional licensing scheme, particularly around housing conditions and ASB. So whether it's perhaps worth at some point revisiting selecting licensing now that we've got that data to see if there are additional wards that can be included at a later date.
Thank you. Sharon?
So in terms of the, we've just submitted the application, and in terms of the selective licensing, the criteria changed when we first started looking at this, and it became very rigorous compared to where local authorities like, I think, Liverpool had a citywide selective licensing. And it's just to be clear, Birmingham on 25 wards will be the biggest application in the country, and that's just on 25 wards. In hindsight, could we have gone for citywide selective licensing? Well, you know, the city didn't fit the whole criteria, and the danger would have been was submitting something that didn't fit the criteria and getting turned down in its entirety. So what we wanted to do was go for wards. We wanted to go for wards where it was more likely to get that sign off from the Secretary of State. I know that officers have had extensive conversations throughout the process with civil servants from Duluck, and I know that I've had conversations with previous ministers around the private rented sector and other parts of housing, and the feedback that we was getting without directly saying, but they was suggesting that it would have been very unlikely that we would have got a citywide selective licensing. So I think the right thing to do in terms of selective licensing is to go forward with the 25 wards at the moment. And I would like to see what difference it actually makes if we do get that coming into play. And if later on we want to look at maybe, you know, extending that, then we need to open up that conversation. But again, Gareth, my ambition from the get-go was always the whole city selective licensing. But unfortunately, the way that the process has been set up in terms of the government, it's just not going to be feasible for us to get that. And other local authorities who have had selective licensing across the city previously, they have struggled with their applications and they have been turned down.
Thank you. Crystal clear. Can we agree their recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Agreed. Sharon, you have an item of any other business, and given that you have to leave, I'm going to allow you to raise that now.
The last time we had Cabinet Committee, there was some criticism for us asking for sort of late reports coming forward and for various reasons. We are now in a situation that's going to be quite similar around exempt accommodation, where the government or Duluck have given us 5 days to turn a bid around and to submit for additional money when it comes to exempt accommodation pilot. The money that we are bidding in for, or we want to bid in for, will be for £2 million over 3 years. That may sound like a good amount of money, but just to be clear, we had over £1 million for, I think, the duration of what we did previously. So it's a lot less than what we were asked, than what we had the previous time. So basically what we're coming to this forum under any other business for is because of the governance side of it. So it's just to sort of ask the committee if they agree to us bringing a late report. If you don't agree to us bringing a late report, then that, I believe, Satinder would have to correct me on this, but I believe if we can't have the retrospective report, it means that it would have to go to the chief exec for an urgent decision, or we have an emergency cabinet committee meeting just to approve that report when it's here. So there are 3 options in front of you: to either let us bring it retrospectively later on, to delegate the decision as urgent to the chief exec, or to give up your time again and we can have another meeting for an urgent meeting to approve it then.
Thank you. I've spoken to the city solicitor about this, and I believe that the safest and most transparent way of progressing this matter is to have an additional cabinet meeting, which will convene to consider that one item. Any comments? Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to highlight and congratulate the development team at the Insider Residential Property Awards 2022. We won yet again the House Builder of the Year for BMHT, and also Residential Regeneration Project of the Year for Perry Bar Regeneration Scheme. I think that's a significant thing for the council. I just want to congratulate Paul and his team and everybody else that was involved in those particular schemes, and making sure that although we are a local authority, as a house builder, we build to a good, excellent standard that's met across the market.
Thank you. I'm sure we'd all wish to join in congratulating the officers on winning those awards, and particularly in my case, the award for the Perry Bar Residential Scheme, which I think is particularly significant given that all of the problems that COVID presented in actually delivering that scheme. Any other comments? Okay, we'll note that. Thank you very much, Sharon. And we will convene that additional cabinet meeting that I referred to in order to take that report. Okay, coming back to the agenda, item 7 is the disposal of council-owned land at Borsley Park, Birmingham. This is a very important report on today's agenda. It's about employment land within the city, and the report seeks approval to bring forward the early disposal of the Borsley Park site on a freehold basis in accordance with the Borsley Park Area Action Plan, which we adopted back in January of 2020. This is a key opportunity for industrial and logistics development, very, very close to the city centre. And the Birmingham Development Plan recognises that this city is one of the most important employment areas within the whole of the UK, and that strengthening this position and ensuring a successful and prosperous economy will require the provision for a wide range of opportunities for economic development and job creating activity. The BDP also requires that a portfolio of readily available employment land is maintained throughout the planned period, and the allocation of land at Borsley Park through the adoption of the Borsley Park Area Action Plan will enable it to be counted towards the best quality land category and help to maintain a continuing supply of employment land in this category in the medium to long term. Of course, as we'll all be aware, Borsley Park is identified as one of 10 key growth opportunities within the Birmingham Development Plan, and the East Birmingham Inclusive Growth Strategy sets out the strategy for a comprehensive multi-agency approach focused on East Birmingham that seeks to ensure that the benefits of growth are shared more fairly. Something we do need to do if we're to ensure that all of our communities have a stake in the future of the city. So it's intended that the proposed development will deliver employment and training opportunities to people in East Birmingham, and the council will work with employers, training and employment support providers to develop clear pathways for local people into jobs, and modelling suggests that an estimated 1,330 jobs will be created by this proposed scheme. The property has been marketed on a targeted basis to ensure maximum return to the council, and any development proposals that may be brought forward by the successful purchaser will be in accordance with the prevailing planning policy. Just to give everybody a little bit of background, because there's been some controversy about this site. On the 31st of January 2020, the City Council regained control of the Wheels site following non-payment of rent and forfeiture of the lease by the site by the previous leaseholder. We subsequently submitted a Levelling Up Fund bid for remediation of Borsley Park to the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. That was done on the 17th of June last year, and it totaled some £19.05 million. That bid was successful, and surveys and works on sites have commenced. In particular, a planning application for treatment of extensive Japanese knotweed on the site was approved in February of this year, and following the appointment of consultants, work commenced on the site in March. The council's also received a nomination from the Friends of Wheels Park for the site to be declared an asset of community value. That nomination has been considered, but it has been decided that the nomination did not meet the criteria for listing. As a result, there is no requirement to provide notification of any proposed disposal. As I said at the beginning, this is a significant opportunity for the city, and the development of the Bordesley Park area will provide the catalyst for regeneration of a wider area that includes Bordesley Green Local Centre and the adjacent Cherrywood Road and Adderley Park areas. The reason why the City Council is bringing forward employment development on the site is set out both in the Bordesley Park Area Action Plan and the East Birmingham Inclusive Growth Strategy. And in response to the need to address the long-standing challenges within East Birmingham, the site will be a catalyst for regeneration in a part of the city where over 1/4 of the workforce is unemployed. The development of this underutilised site will contribute to the creation of up to 3,000 jobs in total within the AAP area, with employment and skills programmes put in place to connect those opportunities to the local community. So ensuring that the people of East Birmingham will have a stake in this city in the future. I'll take any questions or comments, starting with Ewan.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'm going to say, first of all, obviously, I'm sorry to see the loss of the Wheels site. It was a local amenity for the local community that enabled residents to safely take part in motor sports activity, which I think is very important. So I do hope to see some sort of facility like this back soon. I understand there's some levelling money was attached to this site, so I'm just going to ask what happens to that now, and with the site itself when it's sold. Are we going to put any sort of clauses in there to make sure that something needs to happen at a certain time, so it just doesn't get land banked for something in the future when the market suits the owner, and obviously it's a detriment to the local community? I wasn't going to mention anything about rent, but seeing you did, I thought I might. I've got no connection with Wheels. As I understood it, they were quite happily paying their rent, and then there was a large increase as rent came through. Some of it retrospective, possibly, if I'm right from memory, and then they couldn't make that. It wasn't that, we talk about landlords in the city who want to get rid of a resident who suddenly put their rent up. I'm just saying this in their own defence, really. I don't think that they themselves, you could say, were willing or doing anything particularly wrong. I just think that the way the rent was presented to them caused them a big problem in a short time. That's really just for their good name, so to speak, rather than any implication that they were doing anything particularly wrong. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else, John?
Yeah, if I may. A general comment, first of all, if I may, because this is one of several reports of quite a lot of exempt dependencies on today, and nobody's chosen to discuss the exempt dependencies, but those of us with access to them are sitting here with knowledge of what's in them. I just wondered whether we have a process when there are sales and purchases, as there are on this agenda today, for publishing the final figures for the sales and purchases at an appropriate moment. Because at the moment, under the exempt appendix process, it stays private forever. Whereas I think it's probably in the public interest when deals are done and settled to see the final figures, and then they come out with press releases or whatever. But is there actually a process to publish these when there should be, so the public can see what has been received and what is paid? In terms of the Bordesley Park and the real estate, it's been a sad saga. I think perhaps we could hear a bit more about what work has been done with the organisations that are on the Wheels site and with the friends of the Wheels site in terms of their future activities, whether they found relocation to them, and also some assurance that the council will continue to work with those groups to get them access to facilities, sites where they might be able to operate. I know that particularly motorsports, they have very strong cause of fans who enjoy the activity, and they're very passionate about it, which is what we see around the Wheels site, and several years of problems with it as well. And I think we shouldn't, as a council, shouldn't be seen to knock people down when they have a passion, but to try and support them so far as possible. even if the economics means that sites such as this has to move to other purposes. In terms of the arrangements for sale, just one question, which is that I think the action plan proposes a site for employment and skills. What is going to be done to ensure that the purchaser puts in programs and businesses that offer skills training and access to employment for local people in the area?
Thank you. Right, let me attempt first of all to answer some of those questions that have been raised. I will bring in Paul Kitson to answer one of the questions, definitely. First of all, on Levelling Up Fund and what happens next, Ewan, if I could refer you to paragraph 7.3.5 in the report, you will see that discussions are going on with HM Treasury on options to apply the grant awarded for wider remediation, reclamation and acquisition within the area consistent with the purpose of the grant application. So we will be having those discussions.
I did see that. I was just more wondering, are you confident that you'll be successful? Because you kind of applied for that site and you're sort of saying, well, we're not going to have that site now, so we're winding it out. Are you confident that you'll get?
We're confident that we will get a receptive hearing from HM Treasury. What they decide to do is, of course, a matter for them. I'm not going to speculate on that. Clauses on time, I'll come back to Paul to answer that question. Just on the issue about the rent and the rent position. First of all, this was subject to legal action and was tested out in a court of law. So that has been proven to be the case that the actions by the council were correct and reasonable. Also, the council did enter into a temporary contracted out lease with one of the former occupiers, in spite of the fact that rent had not been paid, in order to allow continued operation of motorsports on this site for the period up to October of 2021. So I do think the council has done as much as it could do on this site to accommodate the sporting uses, notwithstanding the fact that, as I've said, this is a very important employment site and very important for the people of East Birmingham going forward. John, on the publishing of the final figure on the sale, I believe that will be done, but I'll bring Paul in on that. And the work with the organisations on the Wheels site, what we have done is we've had our property consultant Savills engage with the motorsports organisations. They've conducted a site search that's been fairly extensive. Unfortunately, they have not yet come up with a site that meets the needs of the occupiers of the or the former occupiers of the Wheels site. I believe that work will continue to the future. I'm getting a nod. And then on the employment and skills and the obligations on the purchaser, again, I'll bring in Paul Kitson to hopefully answer that question. Paul.
Thank you. So on the publishing of final figures on contract, I'm sure that the point of signing contract might depend the publisher, because sales and acquisitions would be on public record and land registry in any event like the without drifting into the information contained in the appendices. Catherine Jones and I met with the purchasers last week, who are a major investor and developer of light industrial and logistics facilities right across the country, in fact, and have major facilities in most regions of the country, the most places in Birmingham. They're backed by major investment funds, some pension funds from abroad, some major former port investment property funds in this country as well. I have every anticipation they're going to get a move on. When I asked them about timetables last week, they talked about close submitting application within a couple of months. They would expect to commence building work, so buildings going up in early 24. And I think it is just worth noting that in addition to the around 1,500 jobs at the site, because 4 months to be built out, they anticipate around 500 construction jobs while they're building out. So if you think about skills, employment and training, there are a number of opportunities there. I think in answer to that question about the role of the site and those purchases on skills and education, I think everything would be well for the city. Council Hanford will provide thorough information about our strategies are aligned. Some of this is accommodated through and it's very close to the which specifically aims to trust the training opportunity together. So there is a large of smaller revenue funded schemes happening anyway in that part of the city into this particular initiative. I think those were the two questions. I'm listening to them. No, thank you very much.
Can we agree then for recommendations 2.1 through to 2.6? I agree. Thank you. Item 8 then is the acquisition of 9 Cornwall Row, Birmingham. So this report seeks authority for the purchase of 9 Cornwall Row. That will provide the ability for the council to invest in a prime strategic asset in Birmingham in accordance with our property strategy, but it also offers a longer term redevelopment opportunity as part of the Snow Hill Master Plan. So this will actually afford in the future the opportunity for redevelopment and further job creation in the heart of the city centre of Birmingham. Any questions or comments? Ewan?
Yeah, it's just really about the risk section of the report. I just thought it looked quite generic as what you say about it was an everyday commercial property. And this, this one, there's a little bit more going on here. Obviously, the council and the businesses are introducing home working, etc. I think the Guardian and all papers said that I think 33% of London's office space is no longer required because of home working in different ways that people are working since the pandemic. And we're not particularly against it, etc. But I'm surprised there's no mention of that in this report because, it's a risk. I mean, obviously you can put it green, amber, red if you want, but to just not mention it just seems sort of just raise my eyebrow.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll ask Paul Kitson to pick up that issue of risk, but I would say that as far as I'm concerned, I think the future redevelopment opportunity as part of the Snow Hill Master Plan is the key reason for the purchase of this particular property asset. Paul.
Thank you, Ian. Noted, and we'll think about that in future reports around how far that risk has been looked at, I suppose. I believe around rental yield that's going to highlight that there are always issues with that. So the city property market is fast moving, especially around commercial property. But two things which are particularly attractive, but this is the relative floor plate entry towards are relatively modest, so played into the companies want city centre locations with a smaller floor plan. And they also increasingly are choosing places which are really close to public transport. And I'd like to highlight how close this particular place is to public transport. So the risks are right there for populations, and we're going to probably scratch that over the wall.
Thank you. Can we agree then recommendations 2.1 to 2.3? Agree? Thank you. Item 9 is Levelling Up Fund Tranche 2 bids. As everybody will be aware, we were successful in round 1 of the Levelling Up Fund bids, securing 3 of the 4 bids that we put forward. So this report proposes to submit 5 further capital bids in the second tranche, totaling some £82.264 million. Those bids are in respect of Erdington High Street, which was unsuccessful in round 1. We've been speaking to the government about the reasons that was not successful, and we are now putting it forward in tranche 2. Northfield Town Centre, Druids Heath, the National Centre for Decarbonisation of Heat, also known as the Tyseley Energy Park, and Edgbaston Community Facilities, the details of which are laid out in the report. In the event of a successful bid, the report also includes approving additional prudential borrowing of up to £6.542 million as the City Council's match funding for these schemes. All of the MPs who have a bid within their constituency have been consulted and support the submission of these bids.
Any questions or comments, John?
Just a general question and comment, because I see that the council could submit 10 bids and 1 for each parliamentary constituency. I think it's close to it, isn't it? Is it proposed that in the course of the programme that every parliamentary constituency gets a bid?
We'd certainly like to do that because we'd like to take the opportunity to lever further tranches of £20 million out of the government. One of the conditions of the Levelling Up Fund is you have to have schemes that are ready to go, what they describe as shovel ready. So that all of the schemes we've put forward so far have met that bar. Unfortunately, there are two constituencies where we do not have schemes that are shovel ready. And so we've not submitted for those two constituencies, either in round one or in round two. But we will certainly consider that in any future bidding rounds that come forward. Gareth.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome that Irvington High Street has been put forward again, hopefully the third time lucky on this occasion. And I'm particularly grateful that the council is actually putting the match funding in this time, so it was particularly disappointing in the end bid to not be successful in the previous round. So I do hope that strengthens our case and we will be successful on this occasion. For those who do know, Irvington High Street is in massive need for some transformation to keep making a fit for the future and to ensure the long-term longevity of our local centre. So this is very much needed, and I'm particularly grateful to all the officers and partners who have contributed to that. So particularly to Dolphin and his team. And I hope it's the case of the adopting advice and crossing of fees that's taking place means that it can go forward.
Well, I think we do need to be clear because it's not to anybody's advantage to be spreading misinformation and myths out in the community. In our discussions with the government about the Erdington High Street bid in round one, the government were absolutely clear that match funding from the City Council was not an issue. In fact, that scheme had the highest amount of match funding of any of the schemes we put forward in the first round of bids. And match funding was not a reason for the government turning down the bid. I do think we need to be clear on that matter. So can we agree then, recommendations 2.1 through to 2.10? Agreed. Moving on then to the Commonwealth Games Legacy Project. This is going itself. The City Council published its legacy plan for the Commonwealth Games back in December of 2021, and that plan covered more than 80 projects that are to be delivered over the short, medium and longer term. Partners now are turning their attention to how we could maximise any opportunities to enhance legacy projects should the Commonwealth Games be delivered under budget. And it's in that context that we're setting out in this report 4 project areas that we would want to make a case to the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport to retain any underspends should they materialise. And those 4 propositions are investing in grassroots sport and culture, developing something called Project 2022, which is a longitudinal assessment of the impact that the Games will have on the lives of a cohort of young people and their families living in the city. Birmingham City of Ideas, which is developing a new museum proposition, which will include a dispersed STEM-themed programme of cultural activity across the city's neighbourhoods and the development of an international flagship museum of science and industry within Birmingham City Centre. And then fourthly, bidding to host the European Athletics Championships in 2026 at Alexander Stadium in Perry Barr, which is very much a legacy event from hosting the Commonwealth Games. The recommendations in this report are that the Cabinet agree the 4 projects and that those projects are developed into business cases for submission to DCMS, and that we authorise a formal bid to the European Athletics Associations to host the European Outdoor Athletics Championships in 2026. And I just want to say something more about that proposition because there is a very short timescale in order to put this bid in. And for the initial bid to be fully considered by European Athletics and for them to provide feedback, seek clarification on matters and enable the city to progress to the final bid stage in September of this year, Cabinet authorisation for the bid is needed, and that includes the need to financially underwrite the event. And you'll see from paragraph 3514, there are a whole list of benefits that the city would derive from hosting this event, including £34 million of economic benefit to the city, £12 million of the event budget being spent with local suppliers and businesses within Birmingham, the opportunity to build on the volunteers programme from the Commonwealth Games with 2,900 volunteers being required for this particular event, and the event generating over 1,300 hours of live television coverage with a media value in excess of £26 million. The actual funding gap on the event is set out in Table 1. in paragraph 9.4, and you'll see the funding gap is some £13.7 million. That is the sum the City Council will be required to underwrite. However, we are speaking to both UK Sport and DCMS about securing contributions from those two organisations that will reduce that figure if we are successful. We've also set aside a sum of £50,000 from the Major Events Reserve to develop the bid to the stage and see it through to conclusion. Any comments or questions? Ewan?
Thanks very much, Ian. I was surprised to see that there's talk of a potential underspend, nothing against the current people, but just when you look at these large games, you generally hear about overspends, etc. So, nice to hear. Obviously, support calls to make to the Department of Media and Sport to reallocate funds for the European Games. I think that having spent all that investment in the stadium, it's a logical thing to do. So, yeah. Supportive of that, also support the Science Museum, got a rich history of science and industry in the city, so I think that should be reflected. I think that there's a lot of memory, we don't all go that way, but you need things to be proud of your city so people know their roots, etc. So yeah, thoroughly support that. Obviously support the grassroots involvement. And I was just wondering if the council itself could look at sort of, some of the pitch hire, etc., to make it affordable, because we want to try and get more people to go out and take part in these things. We've got, obviously, we want to make sure everyone's fit, healthy. There's another item on here about people losing weight, etc. Cost of living crisis. So if the council could do something to help people to use these pitches, I think that would be a positive legacy from the games, actually. But thanks very much, Ian.
Thank you, and I'm sure those comments will be factored into the grassroots sport proposition that we're developing. John.
Thank you. I think it would be terrific if the government agrees to release this funding for this legacy programme. I just wanted to talk a bit about the grassroots sport proposition, particularly as it refers to Alexander Stadium, Perry Park, which you know I know quite well. I think it's quite important that we have a good definition of what is grassroots sport, and that this is not something that's over controlled, because there is a lot of real grassroots activity out there. If you walk around parks which have space, Perry Park's currently quite closed because of various work, but hopefully it'll be opened up after the games. You see people using grassland, there are people quite a few informal pop-up football leagues operating in the city now. People turn up with their own kit, play out the field and play a game. I don't think we should be discouraging that, we should be encouraging it, we should be making space for this kind of activity that people get involved in. Similarly, for the informal goalposts, you see where youngsters gather and they start kicking the ball around. So I hope that when we're talking about grassroots sport, we're talking about something that connects the whole range of informal knockabout right up to people getting involved in mini leagues and slightly more activity.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll have the opportunity to feed those comments in as the business case is developed for that particular proposition. I've said this before, John, but I do think you're very fortunate in the fact that the stadium happened to be in the ward that you're elected for, which has allowed this significant investment to be made into your ward and with the people that you represent. Magic.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm very supportive of the bid for the European Championships. For the reason that you've outlined, Leader, and the other recommendations of the report. As the Leader has said, the benefits of hosting the event in this city are huge, and it's imperative that we are in the front line of all bids, given that we have now got a world-class stadium in the heart of the city and with the associated transport infrastructure. Just want to refer to part 3.2.6 of the report. I'm really pleased that we will be seeking opportunities to introduce infrastructure in local parks. Our parks are very well used, and last 2 years with the pandemic, they've come to the forefront, and I think everyone here will agree that they are the main place for physical activity and light exercise and for people's mental well-being. I visited quite a few parks in the last few weeks as the new cabinet member responsible, and there are so many opportunities for our parks and so much infrastructure that we can install in our parks: outdoor gym equipment, football pitches, cricket nets. And I'm just really interested to note that the Commonwealth Games, they will be holding a beach volleyball tournament. That will be the first time that it's in the Commonwealth Games in England, and it's the second time it's been hosted in the Commonwealth Games. There's a huge demand for volleyball courts, and especially in the inner city parts of the city, and I think it would be a fantastic legacy if we could help to install within this bid 2 or 3 volleyball courts in the city. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Let's hope we do get beach volleyball weather for the games themselves. Liz.
Thanks very much, Ian. And I don't want to stray too much onto what Jane's probably going to say, but I just want to welcome section 3.2, which the investment in grassroots culture, but also the commitment to moving towards an annual international festival in Birmingham. Because I just think I've been in the city centre several weekends running now, and the atmosphere's been absolutely electric. And you think starting from the launch event in March, Wondrous Stories, that was the amazing event on Centenary Square with the huge parade and all of that gymnastics and things going on, and really huge numbers of people on Centenary Square, really excited. I went to Tapping In, the mass tap dancing event, which went ahead despite the pouring rain, and the whole nature of the event had to be rethought. So it was transformed from a tap dancing event to an event in the rain with people wearing trainers, but it was still fantastic, and you could see the joy on the faces of the people who were participating. And then the weekend just gone, I participated in the Canal and River Trust boat parade of 70 canal boats. So I just think the whole atmosphere around arts and culture in the city centre is just so exciting at the moment. But we also need the arts and culture in all our neighbourhoods, and a sense that everyone's going to get a chance to be involved in arts and culture in their community. So I really welcome this, and I hope we're going to pursue this relentlessly for an international festival.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to echo my support as well, particularly in relation to the 3.2.5, which is the sports and physical activity major strategy. I think it's really important that we really invest in areas like this, and we've spoken about the legacy of the games for a long, long time, and we've got so many community organisations that exist in the city, and I'm really pleased to hear that we'll be able to expand on grassroots sports and actually start to from levels of both beginner level right through to elite level. But I'm supportive of the entire report, but particularly in relation to this element, because I've been having conversations with officers around this about how we can shape this and ensure that it's a strategy that the city owns moving forward. And I really think that would be a massive legacy piece for us, because every citizen, every young person, no matter what your ability is, no matter how active you are at the moment, this will enable us to be able to engage those people and see that as a city we're moving forward and we're serious about ensuring that people are active.
Thanks very much. And I think, although it's fantastic to have 11 days of international sport in the city, it has always been the case that the legacy that you can derive from hosting a major multi-sport event like the Commonwealth Games is the important thing. And we have to work very hard to ensure we do secure the best legacy we can for the people of Birmingham from this event. And Liz, I've always considered Birmingham to be a city of events. I think it adds a vibrancy to the city, and the very fact that we're a young city lends itself to us staging events almost regularly throughout the spring and the summer months. And I'm determined that we will have a cultural legacy event arising from the Games. I think in the case of Manchester's hosting of the Commonwealth Games in 2002, they created the Manchester International Festival. And I think the city of Birmingham needs to be equally as ambitious in Birmingham. And just for completeness, because I know there's quite a lot of interest in this, the City Council alongside the NEC company are also having discussions about hosting the Eurovision Song Contest next year. I just want to reassure those who will be joining us over the live stream that that is the case.
Are you going to put forward a council entry?
Well, maybe we should have some cross-party discussion.
We want a return of Gala International.
Can we agree, please? Recommendations 2.1 through to 2.6.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 11 then, the Birmingham Visitor Destination Plan 2022 through to 2027. Jane.
be here. Thank you. Am I not working properly? And I've got digital as part of my. Oh my God, sorry. Did people hear me? Do I need to repeat it? I'm so sorry. Apologies.
I'm sure you were heard, John.
Thank you, Leader. Really pleased that Ben's joined us this morning because he's put a huge amount of effort into the work, a huge amount of effort into making key relationships with people across the city, which is hugely important. We cannot do this on our own, so I'm really pleased to have Ben in the room, and I'm sure he will answer any really complicated questions. However, it's my recommendation that colleagues on Cabinet approve the visitor destination plan, so we can work with our partners to raise the profile of Birmingham as a diverse and high quality leisure tourism destination. And by that, we will encourage more tourists to stay longer and spend more money in our vibrant economy. So can I ask, Leader, that Cabinet approves 2.1 to 2.3 in this report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. The opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games, which will tell the story of Birmingham, it's estimated that will be watched around the world by a television audience of close on 1 billion people. We'll probably never have such an opportunity to present our city and its story to the world. I'm confident that as a result of that, we will attract more visitors to the city over the coming years. Any comments on this, Gareth?
I do welcome the plan. I think Birmingham has a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to see, and we need to sing about that more to get people to come and visit the city. A couple of questions we did have. One of them was the Eurovision you already touched on, so I won't repeat that. But I suppose my other pleas, first of all, just to make sure it's not just the city centre, because whilst we do have an awful lot going on in the city centre, and that's great, but we have lots of attractions, etc., and places to go and do across the city. And we shouldn't let the rest of the city fall behind just because everyone's focused on the few square miles here. Particularly in terms of heritage, lots of beautiful heritage assets across the city, and we need to try and make sure that people can get to them and enjoy them, not just local residents. Obviously, they need to be able to access that as well. And the other comment, obviously, in relation to the action there about commissioning study of major cultural events, which obviously very much welcome, but obviously we need to make sure we have the space to accommodate such events and use the opportunity to raise Festival Square again. We need to make sure we have a large, high-capacity outdoor space to give us the option to hold such events in the future.
That is in the plan. You are aware of that, aren't you? Okay. Jane, do you want to respond?
Yeah, only just to say, absolutely, the importance of, while celebrating everything that's going on in the city, but making sure that all the other areas, the neighbourhoods and wards are involved as well, is high on my agenda to do that. And I will hope to update Cabinet as the year progresses. It's going to be a range of different things. And I think as with colleagues, it may well be, there is so much going on, so much to keep on top of. It may be that I'll do is invite colleagues to come to a briefing, so I can remind them all the different things and some of the stuff that our partners are doing as well. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Jane. Can we agree then recommendations 2.1 through to 2.3? Agreed. Thank you. Would anybody like to take a 10-minute comfort break?
Pilots are meaningful, and we can make further commissioning decisions based on evidence within our local communities. It is recommended that Cabinet approves the contract extension of the current Child and Families Weight Management Service and the Adult Weight Management Services as set out in the annexes. In addition, the extension would allow specific co-production and insight elements from Black African, Black Caribbean families to be utilised, and any benefits and positive outcomes from this recognised, captured and used to inform further evidence-based commissioning in line with the recommendations with Black here. I'd also like the Cabinet to note that the current consultation on the food strategy, whilst weight management can help individuals achieve a healthy weight, it's really essential that we address the food environment of our city to make it easy and affordable to eat a healthy diet.
Thank you. Comments on this, Ewan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we support anything that we mentioned earlier, you know, activity, etc., making residents healthy and improving their health and well-being. We support just dropping into opposition councillor mode, as obviously I'm here to do. I must say that this is an extension of a single contract and negotiation. It was a single contract and negotiation that was not on the forward plan when it happened at the time. So I just think this is something probably you need to keep an eye on with these things, that if you're going to have something that's a single contract and negotiation that is late, and then you're going to extend it, you know, there is sort of governance implications about that. But, you know, overall, we're supportive of the scheme because we want people to be healthy. I just think going forward, we need to make sure that these schemes, you know, they're put out to the public and we can make sure we get the best scheme about.
Thank you. There's no further comments. Do you want to respond to that, Mary?
I'm happy just to note what you've said, and if we'll obviously just keep a note of that moving forward. I'm aware that this is going to go open to tender in 2023. So if that clarifies anything, that it will be possible for others who are interested, and that's all.
Thank you. In which case then, can we agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Agreed. 14 then is Domestic Abuse, Part 4, Domestic Abuse Act 2021, the duty on local authorities and Year 2 funding. John.
Thank you. And just again to note my interest as a council appointed trustee of Birmingham Settlement, which I mentioned earlier. This report seeks retrospective approval for the allocation of 3.27 million, which we received from government to discharge our duties under Part 4 of the 2021 Domestic Abuse Act. Those duties relate to the provision of support to victims of domestic abuse and their children residing within safe accommodation. If you look at Appendix 1, you can see that we put robust arrangements in place to deliver those new duties, including our very well supported Domestic Abuse Strategic Partnership Board and our work with partners at BVSC to deliver a comprehensive needs assessment so we can ensure that we're making the most effective use of our resources in this space. As this is again just 1 year funding from government, who stipulate that we must spend this in full within the 2022-23 financial year, we're proposing to utilise it in 2 ways. Firstly, to continue supporting the Commission services and organisations as set out in Appendix 2 of the report, which enables them to deliver some very vital work there for a further year. Secondly, we're using it to put out a further call for applications to our community grants programme. That creates opportunities for the smaller non-commissioned domestic abuse organisations who don't necessarily meet our procurement thresholds, but they also provide vital support, particularly to groups with protected characteristics under the Equality Act. And again, you can see the range of those we supported during the first year in Appendix 2. One of the key priorities for this year's grants programme will be to address some gaps in provision, including provision for LGBT plus victims of domestic abuse. I think any additional resources to support the provision of services for victims of domestic abuse are of course welcome, and as you can see from the appendices, we've put them to the best use. But what I would like to do is just repeat the plea that I made when I presented proposals for the allocation of the first round to Cabinet back in October, because this remains an annual funding allocation and one that's only confirmed at the very last minute. Indeed, we didn't receive notification of the allocation of funding for this year, 22 to 23, until after this financial year had started. So that makes planning very difficult for us as the Commission and Authority, and of course for our partners, many of whom are already stretched to the limit in terms of the resources and the considerable demand they have for the services. So it means at best we have late reports to Cabinet, but more worryingly, instability and uncertainty for organisations delivering vital services I'm sure everyone here would like us to support. The other thing to say that as it is 1 year funding, that has to be allocated and spent in year and focused on crisis interventions. What those working at the front line of the domestic abuse sector will tell you that what we also need is sustained funding over a multiple number of years to invest in genuine prevention, so we can actually change and challenge social attitudes and behaviours that drive patterns of abuse in the first place. And that really is the big change that we need around domestic abuse, so we can move away from dealing with crisis and stop people from falling victim to this appalling crime in the first place. That's certainly something the board will continue to make the case for, together with our partners here in Birmingham, whilst we take forward the very important interventions that are set out in this report. Happy to take any questions later.
Thank you very much. Gareth.
Thank you, I probably should really watch it. It's I trust you that UBT.
We'll note that. Okay, thank you. There's no further comments then. Can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.3? Agreed? Thank you. Item 15, substance misuse commissioning proposals. Marion?
Thank you, Leader. So this report is seeking approval to extend the current substance misuse contracts for a maximum period of 12 months. I'd just like to make it clear that we're in a very unusual position with provision of services to help support substance misuse, as there are a number of factors, both nationally and locally, which will impact on the strategic direction of these services. There are new national commissioning standards expected in the autumn, so this extension allows us to align Birmingham's commissioning with these new standards once they're published. Taking account of the aspects of the strategy, policy and guidance within the report, it is proposed that there is further time required for the publication of those relevant documents to ensure that the services meet future requirements. Both contracts that this report seeks to extend continue to perform successfully against the required outputs and outcomes, and it's recommended that Cabinet approves the extension of these contracts as set out in the report and delegates approval of commissioning and procurement strategy for future service provision to both myself, the Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care, and the Cabinet members for Finance and Resources.
Thank you very much. Any comments on this? No. In which case then can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? Agree? Thank you. Next then is the Dolphin Centre building improvement works and additional capital funding and contract award. Magic.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm absolutely delighted that the first report I'm presenting to Cabinet in my new role as the Cabinet Member for Environment is for further investment at Ward End Park. The park sits primarily in the Ward End ward and is sandwiched between Allen Rock, where I was born and bred, and Bromford, where I live and represent, so I know the park quite well. The report is seeking Cabinet approval for additional funding that we can deliver the original scheme that was outlined and accept the external grants that were approved by Cabinet in March with the report presented by Councillor John O'Shea and was supported by the then elected member for Ward End, Honorary Alderman Mohammed Iqlaq, and now is supported by the new elected member for Ward End, Councillor Bushra B. The works agreed are the extension retrofit of the Dolphin Centre with green energy interventions, the provision of space for a youth hub that will include a job centre plus employability coach to provide intensive support to local young people, installation of a disabled lift, creation of a cafe that will provide jobs and work experience to local unemployed, and installation of upgraded digital connectivity that will also include a free public hotspot for the community use. In section 7.12 of the report, we have included a list of the headline social value actions committed over the contract period. Notwithstanding the contractual social value, the project itself will be delivering increased social value through the training hub and job centre plus funded youth employability. Unfortunately, the tenders came in much higher than expected, hence why we're back in Cabinet seeking approval for the additional capital for the OLE compliant tender.
Thank you very much. Questions on this? Ewan?
Yes. It's obviously an extra 550,000 for something that we only approved in March. I just looked at the risk register. Risk register was pretty light. It spoke about delivery-related risks. There was no procurement-related ones, and I just sort of think that risk registers for some of these things going forward, if they're going to be really worth a document that gives you the look of the risk what we're looking at, they probably couldn't read that. But
yeah, thank you.
Comment, Magic?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't the Cabinet member at the time of the original report that came through, but construction, it's gone through the roof. There's volatility in all markets, food prices, but construction has felt the pain of what's been happening in the last 2 years. So construction costs have increased. That's the reason why we've come back here. The good news is it's a fixed price contract, and if it becomes apparent more spending is necessary, we'll have to go through contract administrator, but we don't foresee that happening. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Can we agree then recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 17, these updates and next steps for Fast Track Cities Plus initiative. Marion.
Thank you. So this report provides an update and progress made on the Fast Track Cities initiative, which aims to reduce new infections and deaths from HIV. Prevalence rates of bloodborne viruses and TB are higher for Birmingham than the average for England. Prevalence rates are also higher among certain vulnerable population groups compared to the general population. In December 2020, Cabinet approved a report to join the initiative and to include reducing other bloodborne viruses in the focus. In this report today, we are also seeking Cabinet endorsement to sign the Paris Declaration to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030 and the development of a plan of action based on recommendations from the engagement or needs assessment, which will be followed by the implementation phase. As a global city, it's important that we learn from others as we tackle these serious challenges to our citizens. I'm sure that Cabinet will welcome this opportunity for Birmingham to formally join the global city response to bloodborne viruses through this declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Yeah, I do agree with that. It's very important that we are signatories to the Paris Agreement. Gareth.
Basically, yes, I agree anything that tackles problems related to bloodborne viruses, HIV, it can only be a good thing, really. So, I know people who are HIV positive, and they have the difficulty of not only having to manage that condition, but also the stigma associated with it, which is truly tragic. That can be an issue with a double-edged sword effect. So anything that can help tackle the scourge as a result of what happens in relation to this is really, really important. So very, very welcome that. So one question I did have was obviously until I saw this report, I wasn't aware of this, and I've spoken to a couple of people and they weren't aware of this initiative either. So I do hope at some point there's going to be some awareness raising to make sure that certainly people are aware of this, because it certainly sounds like a very good thing we should know about, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the Director of Public Health, Justin Varney, was nodding vigorously while he was saying that. Could I just ask you, Justin, is there any formal ceremony for the signing to the declaration?
Yes, there will be. So because this is a global ceremony, they require the mayor rather than the leader to sign. But then that will involve one of the other global city mayors coming to the city. So it will be the point at which we make a lot of noise and publicity around it. But until we've done the formal signing, we couldn't go big public on it.
Just for clarity, you're referring to the Lord Mayor?
The Lord Mayor, yes.
John.
I think it's obviously a very, very welcome move. I was just looking at some of the next steps, and I noticed that the plan of action is also the next thing. I just wondered how well developed that might be the time of the signing, so that if you're having people just around it, you can give reassurance to communities that action is going to happen.
Aaron?
Yeah, definitely. We'll make note of what you've just suggested, and I'm pleased that this report is being welcomed. I'm just going to confirm with Justin if I'm right in thinking that you're nodding. If I'm right in how are you reading my mind? If I'm right in thinking, I can say anything at this point.
Just sit back, relax.
So I'm right in thinking that the signing of declaration is should be taking place in October. He's nodded already, and so around that time, we'll definitely be making some noise about it, and definitely other elected members will be aware that this is happening. And we're due to sit there and discuss other ways, aside from just the signing, how we can sort of feed this through to ensure that people are there and aware. And even though that the official signing will take place by the Lord Mayor, it's definitely one that will invite the rest of the elected members and everybody else who's supportive of it to be there as well. And yes, around what Councillor Hunter you said about the sort of updates and ensuring that it happens around the same time.
Thank you very much. So we can all look forward to witnessing the Lord Mayor sign up to the Paris Declaration. Thank you. Can we agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 18 then is the Birmingham City Council performance and progress against delivery plan during Q4 of 2021-22. This is in the Deputy Leader's name, Councillor Bridget Jones. But as I said at the top of the meeting, she's at the LGA conference. So I will introduce this report with a brief summary. The report provides a summary of performance against the delivery plan for the period 2020 through to 2022 and the agreed KPIs set for the period January to March 2022. Uses the same format and structure as the three previous quarter reports, so a mix of both KPIs and narrative, summarising delivery activity. The portfolios and portfolio holders have, of course, changed since the period being reported on, hence the different titles and Cabinet members named in the report. There is one additional component to the report for Q4. That's a section summarising the end of year position on the delivery plan. That's in section 4.1.2 of the report. And that section reports that 92.4% or 171 of the 185 delivery commitments in the plan have been delivered. The remaining 14 of the commitments are being delivered to an agreed extended timescale and delivery date. And the report also references the State of the City Outcomes Indicator set. These are currently being reviewed and refreshed to align with the grand challenges and a new corporate plan. So we are committed to presenting this to Cabinet in September. And in terms of performance against KPIs, the position in Q4 is very similar to the Q3 position that was reported. 66 of the KPIs rated blue or green, 16 amber, 24 are rated red. We'll take any comments and questions, and then I'll hopefully bring in Cabinet members to respond. John.
Thank you. I thought it's time to give Councillor Misuse a chance to get stuck in and ask some questions around his portfolio, because it's always very problematic, and he knows he's inherited a difficult department, some of which is reflected in this report. I'm not convinced that the explanation on discussing the class portfolio's delays for the rising number of missed collections is adequate. It says staff sickness and access difficulties. I think there are other problems going on. The report, next paragraph, says new ways of working will be introduced and an intervention plan is ongoing. So is that in place? Is that happening? There's significant changes in working practices taking place. Then the report refers to recycling continuing to be a significant challenge. And this is blamed on an increase in residual waste due to home working. But surely if people are at home more, they have more time to separate their waste and to think about their recycling. So is that the real reason for recycling performance being poor? Or is it simply that we're not making progress in either the planning facilities or the education or the support for households to make better use of recycling? Interestingly, the mobile household recycling centres, which I think partly contribute to the increase in waste collected, which provides a useful facility in that sense. But the data we had in the last council suggested that just 5% of the waste that's coming into the NHRCs is recyclable or has been recycled, which seems very, very low, particularly given the title of the centres. I just wonder if any thought has been given to how they can collect more recycling and possibly do more around ensuring, for instance, that furniture is available for reuse when it comes in and doesn't just go into general waste. Because there is a big demand for those services, particularly in my neck of the woods where access to recycling, to fixed recycling centres has been restricted for the last year and will continue to be so. But the fixed recycling centres have quite good recycling facilities. People know where to take stuff, they're encouraged to do reuse. If you go to the mobile centres, how is that going to be? And they're going to be dump recycling centres. How are they going to be made to work so they do encourage recycling?
Okay, well, get Maggie to rise to your challenge in a second, but first of all, Ewan.
Yeah, similar thing. I mean, first of all, I was going to mention DLOA. It's one I mentioned last time about the satisfaction with the council, especially on housing repairs. I noticed the biggest sort of clean out zone, just 11% of people give a positive response. I think a lot of that's down to the cellular phone is not being answered. And I'm getting an awful lot of that to do with people who are trying to report missed kind of bin collections. And I think it's something that John and his colleagues have raised at full council before, that they have issues over the way the numbers are used to give a sort of high collection rate, because it just seems to be measured on number of missed collections, where I think in the old days it used to include the missed collections that the depot were aware of as well. And you know, as I say in the report there's a number of people who are saying that they can't get through on the phone. And I've got a resident who's asked to sort of put a personal face to what it really means to people when the bins aren't collection. Mr. Robert Smith, both he and his wife are disabled. Due to the nature of their disabilities, they have a lot of waste. Their bin collection missed. Complaint to depot, they promised a Saturday collection. They're both an assisted collection, so they needed that. The depot said they definitely were aware they needed assisted collection. The crew did come out Saturday and clean every house in the street apart from his. Now, he has complained a few times. He has complained to him. This is just discriminating against the disabled. The depot have come back to him and due to the tax. He had to have his waste removed privately because he can't use it as side waste. I'm not going to go into details of what it is, but you can't put out a side waste. He got that somewhere else privately, someone could took that waste away for him. The depot have promised a larger bin, but I mean, a large bin so you can technically go on the fortnight bin collection is not really what he wants. He is suggesting possibly if a sticker could go on similar to that goes on the green waste, so that it's absolutely clear that the assisted collection depot said that crew were told that his house number was assisted collection, they were the main reason they were going out to that road. And so they're going to have one of the crews, why did they do every house on the road apart from him? But, you know, they're kind of upset, and these are sort of human faces behind some of these stats that make things sort of really upsetting. And as I mentioned earlier, working down workers is one of the reasons given, which of course there was a 3.7 saving because of procurement having been made that great. But I think the most important thing is just to get across the personal nature of that, and it's just hopefully we can give everyone the corrections that they expect. No, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ewan. I wonder if I can ask Rob James, is that just too up from you to investigate that particular incident? It does seem extraordinary that the whole road was collected bar that one house.
The depot have confirmed that was the case.
Okay.
Certainly to that.
Thank you.
Assisted collections is clearly one of the issues that we are looking into in terms of a root cause analysis of miscollections. I'm sure Cabinet member will come in, but there are a range of issues that we are looking at in terms of miscollections. And just to confirm that we are recording not only the miscollections that are recorded and reported to the contact sector, we are also recording any roads that are missed that the crews report to us, and we are including those in this year's performance data. In terms of the amount of recycling collected, the actual tonnage of recycling is increasing, but the percentage of residual waste as a proportion is not increasing as much as we would like. But we have to realise that when you calculate the amount of the percentage of recycling collected, that includes all of the waste that is collected across the city in terms of municipal waste, and that includes all of our light tipping, all of the stuff that we collect off the streets, and therefore the new initiatives that we have brought in, whereby we are clearing more waste from our streets, picking up more recycling, more light tipping across the city, that balances out in terms of the percentage of recycling that we are collecting. We are doing, I know that the miscollections are not in the place that we would want it to be at the moment, but we do have a number of actions that we are taking forward with the reference collection crews and the management to put that right. The new ways of working have been introduced, and that means that refuse collectors are going into the depot, not starting early as we allowed them to do during COVID. Refuse collectors have to go into the depot. They are clearing waste at the end of the day and helping other crews out where there have been drop roads. The crews have also got additional duties that they need to perform at the end of the day and at the start of the day. That new way of working has been introduced in the last few weeks, and we have seen a reduction in the amount of complaints to the contact centre. We'll be monitoring that over the course of the coming weeks, and I'm hoping that that will reduce even further. Just to cover the point on staff absences, we did see a number of sickness absences in one particular part of the city, and most of that absence was due to COVID. We have had also difficulties in getting agency drivers. We all know that there is a shortage of HGV drivers across the country, and we've had some difficulties in getting HGV agency drivers into the service when we had sickness. However, the good news is that we have been training some of our own staff to step up to HGV, and we have 30 drivers going through a training program so that they can replace drivers as and when necessary due to sickness or leave. So there are a number of things that we are doing in relation to the service, but I'm sure the Cabinet member will want to add to that.
I'll bring you in a second, Majid, but let's get all the questions out. Gareth?
Thank you, Leader. My question is relating to LO6 and relating to BMHT. Obviously, it's disappointing that the number of new homes completed has decreased over the year. It says the reason for this is the Environment Agency related decisions and reports on external utilities work. I'm slightly confused as to how the Environment Agency preventing us from completing new homes. So, clarification on that. And I hope that steps are being taken to rectify whatever these difficulties are.
We might have to write you on that, given that Sharon's left the room and Julie Griffin isn't here, but I understand the point you're raising. Right, Majid.
Yeah, thank you. I was really pleased when John gave me a platform, and so did you, and then Bob started my thunder.
You did that.
I didn't. So, but Rob has highlighted a number of issues. The new ways of working are now incorporated into the depots and working extremely well. I'll give an example. We get data now on the number of dropped roads. That's from crews and from members of the public. And in end of April, Lifford had 0 dropped, Montague Street had 1 dropped, and Perrybar had 21, Redford had 16 road dropped. That was 38. And this week on, just use the most current figures that we have. Last week, Lifford was 0 dropped roads, Montague was 3, Redfern was 3, but Perrybar was 1461. And that's because of unique circumstances around Perrybar, where there's been issues with staff absences, but there is conversations taking place between the management and the crews there. And the other difficulty we've got with Perrybar, because as you know, the Perrybar depot has been refurbished. Because of that, you've got the street cleansing teams at Perrybar, Holford Drive. You've got a third of the crews in Bromford, in my ward, Bromford, the old recycling centre, and you've got a third of the crews in Castleway. So with the new ways of working, it's like group work in the sense that if there's any missed roads, you call on your colleagues to help you with the roads, and you get the drivers on site. And with Perrybar, it's a bit more tricky because they're all scattered around part of the city, but they are conversations taking place. One of the biggest issues was not just not just access, was primarily also there was a outbreak of COVID as well, unfortunately, around Perrybar. So we did have a number of drivers off, but we have trained, as Rob has said. That was what I wanted to share. We have trained some of our own staff into becoming HGV drivers, and 3 of them are now, I think one's already in post now and he's working this week, and there's another 2 that will be coming on in the next few weeks. And that should stabilise the service from Perrybar depot. But the other depots are working extremely well, so I'd just like to place a record of my thanks to the managers and the frontline staff there. That I can give you from personal experience. When I first took on the role a few years back, I used to get in excess of 100 emails from elected members and members of the public around drop collections. I get a handful a day now, primarily from people living in and around Sutton and Perrybar, because they've been served from the Perrybar depot, which is good. It also shows that the systems that we have in place as a council, in terms of people can see the missed collections that are on the website, that's helpful as well. So people don't necessarily have to come to myself or to their own elected members. Elected members do tend to come to me, but only as a last resort when they've tried, other avenues tried to get the collections done. But Perrybar, over the weekend, we did have a collection, and everything is back to normal again, that we've been told in Perrybar. So it's working. In terms of recycling, there's a conversation we were having yesterday when we were discussing the waste disposal contract going forward and around the increase that we want. We want the companies that we're involved with to do more in terms of recycling. The problem we have, the biggest issue I think we have, is that there's a mass differentiation in terms of recycling. For example, the data that we have available, places like Allen Rock and Small Leaf, they have recycling rate of 22, 23%. but places in certain parts of Sutton, they have between 40 to 50%, some even more than 50%. So we need to look at working more with the communities that aren't recycling. And I've been having a conversation with, there's a, not a constituted group yet, but there's a council of mosques in Birmingham, which comprise of approximately 60 mosques, including the larger mosques. I'm having a conversation with them around how they can play a more prominent role, because the footfall in mosques on a Friday, we estimate, is 50,000 plus. If we can reach out to these people on a Friday, because of where the data is showing us, where the recycling is. We're also victims of our own success, as Rob was alluded to. We're picking up a lot more stuff off the streets, and it's not necessarily recycling. We are looking at reviewing the mobile household recycling centre. I like to call them mobile bulky household and reuser centres, because we want to do more work with Heisley and Sutton in terms of the recycling and in terms of what John was alluding to, in terms of if someone's bought in furniture, we want to see if we can recycle that. So part of the conversation is to see, because we also got contractual sort of elements with Veolia currently as well. But there is we're looking at an avenue where we can encourage that to take place, and working potentially with charity organisations, etc. But that is something that is one of my priorities that I will be having going forward. I don't see us on the bottom of the league in terms of recycling in the country. We are quite bad at it. We need to get a lot better, and all help from elected members that would be helpful. And Ewan, thank you for your comments. And I apologise to Robert Smith and his wife for that. That should not happen. And one of the ideas we are looking at around assisted collection is to have stickers, so that so it's not your BCC staff, when they go out, they tend to know the houses because they tend to have the same routes. Part of the new ways of working is the crews have the same routes, so they know every single property in the row. So they'll know where the assisted collection, so they should be able to collect. The difficult thing we have when we use agency staff, if it's like on a weekend or something, then they may not necessarily have that data, but that's something that we need to be better at, where that communication is passed over to all crews who are on the roads, because the last thing we want is to have any assisted collections missed. And I have asked officers to detail reports and data on any missed assisted collection. I think that's imperative that we get that right in the first instance. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks very much. Yeah, sure.
I mean, it was a bit disappointing in terms, to be honest. I mean, Perry Bar doesn't just do some cold food, it does quite a lot in North Birmingham. And there was a lot of routes that have dropped there. Montague Street might do really well. But, you know, Perry Bar, there's an awful lot of North Birmingham, there's an awful lot of routes that will drop there. You know, people just can't get through on the phone. You say about the agency driver. I mean, I've got to give Les Williams absolute thanks. I mean, I sent him an email at 5 o'clock yesterday, 10 o'clock last night. He came back in and had spoken to Robert Smith, and he'd spoken to him. That wasn't an agency crew that got that. That was a very city council crew that dropped that route, and they knew what to do. I'm really glad to go backstage. I think that you say it's back to normal, and some culprits not. The green waste has been sat out there, has been dropped. It'll be Tuesday today for roughly for us. It'll be Friday when they come to make that. There's been no collections of green waste that's been dropped. And so you may want a platform when you come to these meetings, but I would just suggest you probably get a tone of it right for someone's service coming out there. Thank you very much.
So we've taken up all the comments, and we are working with that at Perry Bar to try to make work on the lines of Lifford, Montague and Heisley. They're doing extremely well.
Thank you. Can I pick up two of the other comments that were made? Complaints about housing repairs. We have made a change to the housing repair contractor in East and West Central area, and we would expect to see improvement. Certainly complaints about the contractors that carry out housing repairs. The Cabinet is expecting to see some improvement in that area. Indeed, it's one of the non-negotiables that the Cabinet have set in order to see some improvement. And then secondly, Gareth, on your question about the environmental, what's the phrase used in the report? The Environment Agency related decisions that have impacted on completions of new homes. I've got a briefing note. I'll read out the line. Handover of 71 units have slipped into 2022-23 due to difficulties with the Environment Agency, but it doesn't say what those difficulties are. So I will chase that up and get something to you in writing. So with that then, can we agree recommendation 2.1? To note, thank you. Item 19, there's dated meetings, appointments to other bodies and appointments to outside bodies for the 22-23 municipal year. On a cross-party basis, we've been submitting names. Any further comments on this, Gareth?
Thank you. I noticed in the report, particularly on Appendix B, there are some gaps on that side. I didn't provide names for them, so I don't know what's happened, but I'm happy to provide them now or whatever. after the meeting.
Perhaps you could, follow up with Errol after the meeting.
Yes, so, and then the other one is on the other C. For some reason, my name was on for BBSC, which is an error. As much as I'd like to be on BBSC, I do have to have a commitment, so we can change that before I will provide a name for that in due course.
Very carefully explained. John?
I noticed one outstanding vacancy for Lieutenant Councillor. Can we provide a name for that?
Yes, you can. Okay, with those amendments to come, can we agree their recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5? Thank you. And that takes us to planned procurement activities for July of this year through to September. Yvonne?
This report provides details of the planning procurement activity for the period of July 2022 to September 2022. And procurement activities reported previously are not repeated in the report. One of the planned procurement activities under the Chief Officer delegation set out in the Constitution for the period of July 2022 to September 2022, as detailed in Appendix Number 1. I take this report as read, Leader.
Thank you. Any comments on this? No. Thank you very much. If we can agree, then recommendation 2.1, which takes us to any other urgent business. Does anybody have any? No? Okay, thank you all very much.